Hey NALPA members, Mark Sutton here, President of National American Legion Press Association. Before we get started with the training video from Washington DC conference, I want to give you fair warning. The audio and the video doesn't line up 100%. That's because I had to supplement the audio with what I recorded on my voice recorder, because the audio from my camera that I had set up was picking up the air conditioning unit that was sitting behind it, blowing cold air on it. So all you hear is a small hum, and you don't hear any of us. So I've had to marry up the audio and the video. It's about a 45-minute video, but it's got some good information. Hope you like it. See you soon. So this is welcome to what would be determined as a inaugural event. We're going to try and do trainings like this at other national meetings, talking to Holly and Henry and getting with Bridget, and hopefully doing things like this at spring meeting, national convention, fall meetings, just a small get-together of the NALPA members or anyone who wants to learn more to come in. My name is Mark Sutton. I'm the current president of NALPA, and we have Ken Kreatzer from the Detachment of New York.
Right.
He runs, well, I'm going to let him explain what he does. What we're trying to do tonight is, Ken is all over Facebook covering West Point football and sporting events, and he does a lot of things on using Facebook Live and the internet. He has a radio program, the Sons of the American Legion Radio, and we just want to talk about the things that he uses to do some of the work that he does. And then I'll also share some of the things that I've been using in Michigan that I do. We're hoping that as time goes on, I know that there's a senior vice out in Colorado named Rob Smith, and he goes on Facebook Live with his phone, and I also notice he has upgraded equipment. We want to talk to him probably later on in another episode, but we kind of want to, I'm going to take this video back home, we're going to edit it, we're going to throw it up online, and hopefully people can get something out of it. So thanks for coming. Ken, all yours.
Mark, thank you very much. It's good to see you tonight here in Washington, D.C., and be part of the Sons of American Legion Radio, tell you a little bit about it. For me, it's honoring my dad's service, who was a World War II Army veteran, served 20 years in the U.S. Army, having enlisted in 1939 with the New York National Guard. And I think of him often when I'm up at West Point talking to all the cadets. He'd really enjoy that. What I thought tonight we talked about is some of the best practices that we've learned. We've been doing this almost 10 years now, and we've been very fortunate with it. We got started by sending a paper press release out about our post-Memorial Day plans to a number of local reporters and a radio station, WVOX in Rochelle, New York. And lo and behold, they called us and said, why don't you come in and tell us about your Memorial Day plans? So we did. So they said, oh, call us up, tell us about how your Memorial Day went. And we did. So about 2 weeks later, it's the night before Flag Day, and they said, could you call up and tell us about Flag Day? So I said, well, I'm going to have to go into my manuals and check to make sure I know all the details on treating a flag appropriately, but we did that, and then they said, I said, we could do features on a number of area veterans and military, and so we're still at it about 10 years later, and we moved into doing our own show with John Duran and Jack McGurk, my two colleagues, and we have a great time telling the story of veterans, people in the military, college athletics, and it's really led to great relationship. Literally one day we had a little extra airtime, and it's during the fall football season. We said, oh, by the way, West Point's got a game this week. Why don't we call them up and see if they'd have somebody call in and tell us about it? So their athletic department person, Bob Beretta, called in, and Bob told us about the game coming up and the festivities and the pregame and all. And he said, oh, by the way, if you come up, why don't you make sure you come by and sit in the post-game press conference. Well, we haven't missed one since. And it's amazing because they hand us a microphone, and we talk to the players after games, we talk to the coach, and really it's a great honor, and you learn a lot about people. Talk to people after they win, talk to players after they lose, and really we go out to practice once a week and interview the head coach, and then we interview 2 or 3 players every week, and we always ask them where they're from, what high school they went to, why did they go to West Point, how did they get through freshman year, time management, what are they studying, what branch of the Army they'd like to go to, and then, oh, by the way, how's practice going for the game on Saturday? It's a very busy lifestyle at West Point for the cadets, managing academics, managing military training, and then for athletes, Division I athletics, and for football, well, they may be playing Ohio State on Saturday, or they could be playing Duke, and then there's those big games against Air Force and Navy at the end of the season, which Army won both of this year, and for that they took home the Commander-in-Chief trophy.
Oh.
And boy, are they happy at West Point about that. First time in 20 years. But one of the things we're able to do, and West Point sometimes gives us special opportunities, is to talk to veterans. We talked to the head of the physics department a couple of weeks ago, and he gave us a tour of all the facilities there. And two of the Army football players actually were physics majors this year. Brett Toth, the right tackle, and Blake Wilson, the kicker, were both physics majors. And so we're asking about how you can do both. But we cover a lot of events in the New York City area. One of the big things for us has been New York City Fleet Week. We've been involved with really since 9/11, and we got involved with hosting sailors and Marines that are coming into New York City. For the event, we've been able to invite them up to Memorial Day parades, and this past year we did video of the Memorial Day parade up in our community in White Plains, and we interviewed about the dozen sailors and Marines that came up, and it's interesting. We learned how to do group interviews, and some of the audience might like this. We do this for when we talk to. We got to some of the community plays and talk to the children, and sometimes we'll just say, "Tell us your name and where you're from." And that goes a long way when you're doing a group interview. And we do that when we meet groups in the military. We also do a lot of work on health care for veterans and for the military. We got involved with concussion awareness. We actually sat in on a seminar held at West Point a few years ago where the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Odierno, and Roger Goodell from the NFL joined forces to say both organizations have a problem with concussions, football players and Army soldiers. We learned that day that any soldier that's near an explosion very likely gets a concussion. And we didn't know that, but they said, but that could be a contributing factor to PTSD. And for football, we all know the issues that are coming up, so it's something we spend as much time on as we can, and a number of other events. We actually do go cover the Naval Academy when we can. We cover the Media Day before the Army-Navy game each year, usually the Wednesday, 10 days before the game. And it's our chance to interview the Navy captains who come up, as well as their coach, Ken Kreatzer. And this year was kind of neat because I go in, I'm doing my thing, I'm doing a video interview with one of the Navy captains, and then after that, somebody from Showtime came up to me and said, "Can you sign a release?" And they videotaped me for their program this week in Navy football. And so I got a 10-second cameo on their national TV show that week, which was neat. But we also do things like we work with the Girl Scouts locally. They have a group, the Heart of the Hudson, which is 7 counties around from Westchester towards Albany. And their group has been able to send about 100,000 cookie boxes a year out to troops. And we've been able to help them actually deliver cartons to troops overseas because we have some contacts through West Point and through some of our other military PAOs. We're able to find an address of somebody who can receive them in Iraq or Afghanistan. This past year we sent some to the Navy in Naples, Italy, where their base is, because a friend of ours we met at New York City Fleet Week almost 10 years ago now is a senior officer at the Navy base there. our good friend Ray Kemp, and he was able to help us with that. So we do a lot of things to talk to authors, and what's kind of neat that we've done is, you mentioned Facebook Live. We've been starting to use Facebook Live on some of our broadcasts, especially things that are very time sensitive, like a pregame show, a postgame show. It all depends on whether the Wi-Fi is good and how timely it is. Sometimes it's better to just take straight video and use that, because you get better quality, especially if it's something you think people are going to watch over time. Like, we cover the West Point graduation, and annually our most viewed video is the 2 minutes before the end of graduation at West Point, where all of the cadets have raised their right hand to accept the commission as second lieutenants, and then there's a prayer, and then there's this moment where the superintendent says to the commandant, "Dismiss the class." And then the commandant says to the first captain, "Dismiss the class, first captain." And he or she turns around to the Corps of Cadets, the seniors, the new second lieutenants, and says, "Dismissed!" And they toss the hats. And it's just a great moment. And we're fortunate to be able to stand up in front and capture that moment and send it out. But we take that on regular video. Somebody else has got it on live TV. But we want to have that moment to show to people who couldn't get there, or for the people there. It's a keepsake. So you have to kind of evaluate. And everybody tells me they think of it the same way about whether to take live video, like we'll take it off of our cell phone, my Samsung 8 Plus, or take it, as straight video, or to go into Facebook Live and capture. It sends out a live signal. We had a great moment on this year. You can't tell CBS Sports this, though. We did Facebook Live of the march on of the cadets and the midshipmen before the Army-Navy game. And if you know, this year it was snowing. And so I had to I'm using this phone on this tripod like this. And I'm standing about 30 feet from the CBS booth, and I'm going live off my phone as the cadets march onto the field. And I would move right in front of where the first captain, Simone Askew, was giving the commands to the Corps. And then they marched out by when they left, and then the brigade of midshipmen came in, and we captured all that on Facebook Live from the field. We had 45,000 page views on that. And so it's kind of amazing what you can do. I went home and I was watching the CBS broadcast, and the leadership of the Corps of Cadets is marching by, and I'm on the field with this out here and my plug-in microphone. I'm doing commentary. And you can see me, and it was kind of neat what you can do.
So let's talk about. So one of the things we were talking about before we started was that one of the things is if you're doing Facebook Live, it has to be portrait. Most phones you have to go portrait to go Facebook Live. Video can go portrait or landscape. But most Facebook Live you have to go portrait. So can you explain the device that you've got right there?
Yeah, one of the things that we use two types of monopod and a tripod. And I started out just using this tripod. And the way it works is you just put the phone in like this, and you can turn it on and do video right off of this. Let's see if I can turn on. And we even have a little light source that gives us some extra light. Which helps. Sometimes we're doing practice in November and it's dark out, and we're working off the stadium lights, which is sort of hard to do. But this enables us. This is one way to take video. And if you're just doing straight video, there are moments at times like when you're on a crowded field where it's helpful to be able to raise the camera high. And this is pretty steady. This holds the camera really steady. But it's like, and this bracket's about $10. And a monopad like this is only about $20. So this whole thing is $30. This is $10 on. You can find all of this on Amazon. But it works, and for in many situations. And I can plug in the phone.
And so let's talk about this. What is this piece? You got two pieces. You got a microphone, and then what is this thing?
This is a preamp, and
And just so you know, it's called iRig, a pre-iRig. The letter I, R-I-G, is what this device here is.
See, it plugs right in like that. You make sure the green light is on. There's another iRig microphone that just runs off the power from the phone. This one gives a boost of power. There's a battery in here.
Oh, okay.
And so it boosts the sound level, which is good. And as long as you make sure you turn it on. There's little drills in life in doing this that you got to be careful about.
So is there an on-off switch on your microphone?
No, this is just have to make sure it's plugged in. It has separated in the middle of an interview before. And one of the things that's nice is you may see I have the Legion logo on two sides of this and the Suns logo on the other two sides. This is about 8 years old, so it's a little, I have to replace it. But this is what's called a microphone flag.
Microphone flag.
And there are companies, it costs about $50 if you don't need a rush order. And you send them the logos and they put it either on 3 sides or 4 sides. And so when you go in front of somebody, the organizational logo is out there, which happened when we interviewed the Secretary of the Army 2 weeks ago. Because I'm sitting down next to him and I decided to use this microphone. And I'm out like this as he's speaking. And so the Legion logo is out on the West Point video that they did.
Oh, okay.
Which, that shows the American Legion was there and was talking to the Secretary of the Army when he visited. So we have those kind of...
And can you use this device in multiple cameras that you have?
Yeah.
Anything that has a microphone jack in it?
Well, you have to be real careful. Like I can't use it on my T5i, which I'm taking video from today. But I'll just show you how when we go into Facebook Live, we put the camera up like this and go into Facebook and set it up. And the microphone on this phone, which as I said is a Samsung 8 Plus, which I'd recommend. The microphone's pretty good, but sometimes I will put in another microphone into it. But when in doubt, I just let it go by itself. The challenge is oftentimes, even for, when you're at press conferences or you're at a Legion event where there's a speaker, you're probably going to be picking up sound off the microphones and the speakers in the room. So you get pretty good sound on that. But that's sort of something. Getting good sound is really kind of one of the challenges in doing video.
So when you're in a press conference, kind of like this area here, you have people out there, do you have a separate recorder that you put up on the lectern that they're giving from? Or are you just trying to record from where you sit?
Well, it's kind of a challenge because really you're trying to pick up the sound off the speakers, which will be around the room.
Okay.
And so it's really something we're working on. There's sometimes I'll attach a set of speakers on top of this. There's a device with 2 microphones that'll plug into it that'll get us better sound in a press conference. But it takes a little time to set up. And one of the things you learn in dealing with athletics is the coaches have no patience. When they're ready to talk to you, you got to be ready to say, Coach, you got to have the camera on, microphone ready, and say, Coach, what did you work on in practice today? What do you think? What do you have to do for offense? You got to be ready because if you're not ready, they're on to the next person.
So when you're on the field, because that's a lot of activity is going on, are you using this with a microphone that's attached in it, or are you just using the camera attached to this?
Most of the time, I'm putting the camera in just like this, and I plug in the microphone, and away we go.
Okay.
And you try to keep it simple because you're in an environment that's not very forgiving in terms of you don't get a second chance. So you try to keep it down to a limited number of variables, and the equipment is very reliable. The only problem is when you're out of practice and it's over 90 degrees, it may not work. And we kind of learned that because from covering some August practices that it may shut off when it goes over 90 degrees.
Okay. So
a couple of times they let us go into their locker room lobby to do interviews where it was air conditioned.
Okay.
So
I just want to let everybody know the holder itself is called a Zuma XUMA, and it's a model MTA 3008. XUMA MTA 3008 that's attached to this, and this is just a monopod
And this
then you
one
just
is
a regular pop.
a SunPack Ultra 7000. That's a very good one.
And then his device up here is a Roma, Roma, P-U-R-O-M-A is the device that he can do his phone with.
Yeah. So that's kind of the basics on equipment, but there's a lot of gadgets involved, and you tend to be very careful about it because there's always a moment of truth. After I do an interview, did I get the sound? Did the sound come out okay? And one time I interviewed a brigadier general at West Point, and then, the sound wasn't very good. So, you learn from some mistakes. Most of the time it goes pretty well. And it's really a smartphone. It really puts everybody in the communications business. It's a very, very powerful tool. You got to make sure you use it correctly. But I do most of my editing off a $3 app on the phone. And so it's, I use an app called AndroVid Pro. AndroVid Pro, which works on Samsungs, and I understand that they don't have an iPhone equivalent, but it's a $3 app. I do most of my editing on that. The other thing we do that it's very good when you're covering events is you're trying to get a good picture of someone. And last year we covered an event at West Point called the Thayer Award, where former President George Bush was the honoree, and there was no moment. They had a parade for him, and then there was a dinner. There was no moment where we got close to take a photo of the former president. But the only time he kind of went by was when he rides a Jeep, which is part of the tradition of this, with the superintendent reviewing the troops. And he just drove right by us, and so we're going like this. I'm taking pictures on my phone, and I actually took video. And what I found is useful on that situation is you can go frame by frame and grab a frame for a photo. And so you can go and look at each individual frame off of this app I was telling you about and pick the best frame for the picture of the subject. And that's very helpful because sometimes you can only click a camera so many times in an important moment. Sir?
You ever thought about using an earbud to check the audio as you're recording?
Sometimes, yeah. What I'm really hoping someday they'll have on the phone is a sound meter, so that when you're collecting sound, you get a meter indicating that the phone is getting the sound. But I keep telling the people at Samsung that, and maybe they'll listen one day. I guess we've had, we get a chance to meet some neat folks, and one of the neat opportunities we did last year was Army was playing out at Ohio State on a Saturday in September, and I drove out there from New York, and we decided on the day before to stop in Pittsburgh. And the reason for that is there's a West Point alumnus playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've probably heard of Alejandro Villanueva, the left tackle, number 78. He was a West Point football player. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and the Eagles gave him a chance, and the Steelers saw some potential on tape. So they brought him in, gave him a year to bulk up to be a left tackle. Now he's made the Pro Bowl this year. So I was able to stop and visit with him and do an interview. And so really it was neat. And it's funny who you meet in life. I ended up meeting Cam Hayward, the defensive tackle on the team. And he was very gracious. I mean, visiting the Pittsburgh Steelers training center and locker room, it's a little bit intimidating. I didn't really know anybody, but everybody was very nice to me. But I ended up having a conversation with him, and I said, can I do an interview? And he was very nice about it. And it turns out he's got a tremendous number of children's charities that he sponsors in the Pittsburgh area, which we asked him about. And then I asked him about leadership. What does it mean to be a captain of an NFL team? How do you demonstrate leadership? So he's a new friend that we're going to try and stay in touch with. And as far as questions with interviews, what I find a good interview is 3 questions. And sometimes I'll ask a fourth of a subject if there's some terminology that's not clear, or there's a natural something that they mention that should be further developed. But I always find that 3 or 4 questions leads to about a 4 to 5 minute interview, which is really good. What I have to remind myself sometimes is do a kind of a get acquainted first question. Like with the football players or basketball players, it's easy. You just say, hey John, good to see you, how was practice today? And then they'll say something, and it just loosens them up a little bit, and then I'll talk more about the questions I have for them for the day. And that work goes a long way with people. Just getting them started, building a conversation. Interviewing, to me, is a lot about relationship building. The key for me is that I want to have the guests want to do another interview with me. And because they were comfortable, I ask questions. They have this expression I learned at West Point, you stay in lane. You ever heard that expression, stay in lane? You ask questions that are appropriate to the day and the topic, and you don't surprise somebody with an odd question. And so when you build a reputation, I think for doing that, you get more opportunities, more invitations.
So when you started doing the radio and they invited you to cover a West Point game, who was the individual? What is the title of the individual you deal with in order to, if someone wanted to cover a press conference or cover an event like that? Is there a particular title that these organizations rely on for that?
Yeah, and wherever you are in the country, especially if you're near a city, there's going to be a military office, the Navy, the Army, Air Force will have offices in major cities around the country. They all have public affairs officers. So if you have a question about the branch of service or an event coming up, you reach for their public affairs officer and their office. And that's usually something you can find online and ask a question about an event. And if you're doing this regularly, you want to build rapport. The PAOs tend to change every 2 to 3 years. So in New York City, like we do a lot with the Navy, I've probably known six different people have held the public affairs officer job. And some of them we stay in touch with. One of them's out in Hawaii. He's the PAO for the sub base in Hawaii now, Corey Barker. And all that helps. One story I'll tell you is one of the PAOs from the Navy in New York City had left and went to Washington, and then she took the job at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, as the Navy public affairs officer. And so I said to, could we get an interview, just say, what is it like to live and work at Guantanamo Bay from the public affairs officer? So she says, great, her boss will do the interview. Her boss is a rear admiral who's the detention center facility manager or officer in charge. And I kind of learned something from that experience, and it was about 4 or 5 years ago, that you don't have to be NBC, and don't try to be NBC. What we found, because when I said, I got to ask some serious questions here, this is a very serious guy, vital role he's performing, Rear Admiral in the Navy, and so I kind of went through reporter questions, and he kind of gave me rote answers that he gives 3 times a day. Then I asked him, I said, well, 4th of July is coming up. I hear you have some special festivities for all the families that live at Guantanamo Bay. And he said, oh, yeah, we've got races, we've got picnics, we've got all kinds of different festivities. And he, you could tell he lit up talking about that. And then I asked him a little bit, well, we work with the Girl Scouts and cookies out and whatnot to troops and sailors. And he said, that's so important to the morale of the young soldiers and Marines at the base. They have a tough job, and when they hear that the folks back home are thinking about them, it makes the world a difference. And that's what he wanted to talk about, and that's what turned out to be an effective communication, was just, and finding out what someone wants to talk about. Turned out to be very valuable in that situation.
So when West Point goes out to, like, we had talked on the phone about coming to Ohio State. So when you go to a non-military event, there's some military there, but they're not the ones putting it on. What kind of person are you generally looking for in order to make sure that you can have the inside track on that?
Well, I think there's, it's a sports information director, and take a break.
I'm going to pause and then hit play again.
It says here the movie you recorded exceeded 4 gigabyte limit.
That's okay. That's okay.
Split it to 3 files.
That's okay. That's what it does.
Okay.
And
So as a point of information, if you buy a DSLR camera that has video capability, Federal regulation requires that they do not record more than 29 minutes of video.
Oh,
Otherwise, they're considered a video camera, which falls under a different tax bracket. So that is your federal government in line with. So if you want to take more,
Consumer Report.
so if you want to take more than 29 minutes of video, you need to buy a video camera. Otherwise, less than 29 minutes of DSLR will do that. So when you go to other other stadiums like Ohio State, or if you ever come to Michigan, University of Michigan,
2 years.
who are you talking to in those stadiums?
Well, the sports information director runs the show for media invitations and credential approval. And sometimes it can be, they have limited space, so it can be difficult to get an opportunity. But I think one of the things that I think Post can do is affiliate with their high school teams or college teams in the area. You can build some excitement by just covering a high school football game or a lacrosse game or a baseball game, whatever it is, and certainly all the American Legion baseball games. We happen to work with West Point and their football team. We've been very proud of that opportunity. We're trying to find some people to cover Air Force and Navy on a regular basis. We had this great situation where we collaborated with the Detachment of Alabama in January. One of the Army football players was in the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, Brett Toth. And so I couldn't get there, but I said maybe I could get somebody from the Detachment of Alabama to go. So we got the detachment commander and his historian to go to the game. They took video, they took photos, they did a post-game interview with Brett Toth. And what great collaboration that is for a post or squadron in New York to be able to call a squadron in Alabama and have them help us out for covering a notable game. I mean, Senior Bowl is a notable game. So that was really good, and I appreciated that. But I would encourage Posts to think that, you can become a media organization. One of the things here in business today a lot is that every organization is a publisher. And a Post and a squadron auxiliary can become a media group. I mean, they've done newsletters for years and years, but video and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter are all outlets that you can use. Quick story, we cover the New York Yankees Military Appreciation Day, usually in July, and that's an event that benefits the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, a great charity the Steinbrenner family support. So we were down there, we did a couple of interviews with the representatives of the charity, and so I stick around and watch the game, and then there's a post game in a room not so different from this, where the Yankee manager, up until this year, Joe Girardi, would be there. And a couple of years ago, I'm taking video of the post game. And so afterwards, one of the Yankee officials comes up to me and says, "Ken, you're with a radio station. What are you taking video for?" And I said, "Every radio station's got a Facebook page, right?" And so the corollary to that is every post and squadron and auxiliary can have a Facebook page.
So what social media channels, outlets do you use for Sons of the American Legion Radio?
Well, we started on over-the-air radio, which we continue to do. It's our core, WVOX in New Rochelle. We are very appreciative of the team there letting us do that. But we kind of expanded. We used to write for a couple of blogs, and then we literally one day I watched a reporter from one of the regional newspapers. He's interviewing the Army quarterback, and I'm out there with my tape recorder, digital recorder, and he's got his cell phone up and he's taking video of the interview. And I didn't realize how valuable that was, but he's putting it up on his Facebook page. And so we converted at that moment from digital audio to video. It's kind of great moments that you change how you do things. So every interview we've done since then has been on video, off of a cell phone or another camera. And the thing about it is that you produce what's called an MP4 file, and you can take out the audio. Let's say we're going to go on the radio station with that audio, with that interview. We can actually play the interview on the radio off of YouTube, off of a cell phone. We just plug it into the radio station, and it's amazing. Well, I have it recorded on YouTube, and we play it on the air, and it sounds perfect. So, I think in terms of, topics, when I talk to a military member, and every once in a while, like when we went out to Ohio State, we got invited to interview the Brigadier General, who was kind of the VIP guest for the pregame party. And so I do, a couple of questions, but I always ask about this, tell us, why did you go to West Point? And I'll say, what did you learn there that has helped you in your career? And then I'll ask them, tell us about the path of your career, is a typical way I'll say it. So you can hear a little bit about the stop, different things. Then I may say, what's the favorite thing you've ever done in the military? And one time I did that in a Navy League event in New York City, and it was a fellow, it was a pilot, he had just made admiral, and he smiled, he said, "Commanding officer, USS Nimitz." And it turned out I'd seen him on television when they did the special on the Nimitz a few years ago. He actually was the CO during that time period. So, those are the things, sometimes you'll ask of someone, like I asked the Secretary of the Army when we talked to him, I said, why should young Americans coming out of high school consider the U.S. Army as an option? Or consider going to ROTC or consider West Point? Why should young Americans do that? And he gave a nice, answer about, all the leadership skills that the Army teaches at every level. So those kind of things. The other thing I think what we've done and Post can do is building distribution. And it takes time. Because of all the different social media, you kind of collect, like on Facebook, you try to collect page likes. And we're up to 5,600 page likes on our page, West Point Football Report. And that got us about 2 million page views last year. And it was up about 20%. And then through the other media, the more you do it, the more you bring it, promote it, especially on Twitter. We'll put some of our interviews on LinkedIn. So the more you do, the more attention you tend to generate. But we've actually been able to start sponsorships on our Facebook page. We have 7 paid sponsors this year. 4 of whom are local businesses. We have a baker, we have a car repair, we've got a travel agent, we've got a chiropractor, and then we've got the Westchester Bank and a marketing company, Fosnian Marketing, and the New York Yankees. The New York Yankees gave us a $500 donation this year, which went a long way. We sent out a fundraising note to about 70 people, and they responded back saying, "How do we help you?"
So what kind of love do you give them on your Facebook page?
Well, what we do now is we put in we say thank you, and then we say to the team, and we'll say a special offer from the New York Yankees, and we'll give they actually gave us 2 paragraphs of copy to use.
Oh, okay.
And it has a phone number, and it's got a URL. And so what I do is I store that in my cell phone, and whenever I have an opportunity, like I do a poster in the middle of a game, I just go into my phone directory, I cut and paste the copy, and I put it into the bottom of the post. And we'll get some photos of that out, because the other thing that we do is when we cover an event, we always videotape or photo the national anthem and the color guard presentation. And so when we do that, we always have that sponsored by the American Legion. And what we'll say is, best wishes from the world's largest veterans organization, taking care of veterans 24/7. More information at legion.org. And then we'll usually put in the URL for the Legion Online update. So that references. Because that's something that, we think is a way to, promote membership. By putting the Legion's contact information right in front of viewers. And most of those posts like that get 3,000 to 4,000 views. Occasionally we'll get up to about 10,000 when we really do well.
So we only have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Ken at this time?
Yes. What do you do about the space on your cell phone for video?
Have a lot of storage.
How do you get a lot of storage? You buy extra?
Yeah, I have 180 gigabytes of space on my phone.
180 what?
Gigabyte. I think an average cell phone comes with about 30 to start.
Oh, no wonder I'm running out of room.
And so I went and got the biggest card I have. The challenge with
So
that,
180, and how do you do that?
So-
You just purchase it?
So Jen, depending on your phone, iPhones do not have this.
Okay, I have it on Android.
Okay, so check with the manufacturer, but you might be able to add a micro SD chip.
She's got 100, she's got
Micro
130 megs, or gigs rather.
Okay,
She's got plenty.
it's a micro,
But I'm always running now.
okay, it's a micro SD chip, and you can,
Micro SD chip.
yep, ask Best Buy, buy one, and you can slide it in the slot, and that'll give you extra
You
storage.
slide it in somewhere.
There should be a slot somewhere
yeah,
inside
someone
the
in a
phone.
store will do that.
Slide
Yep.
in slot.
Yep,
Or on the iPhone, you just purchase for 99 cents an extra megabyte.
What is it?
Gigabytes.
You can purchase an extra megabyte for 99 cents
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that a month or?
well, that's for the iPhone. You can,
for each megabyte.
yeah,
Megabyte,
Yeah.
that's on the
Gigabyte.
iPhone.
Gigabytes, yeah.
Otherwise, you have to
99 cents.
Otherwise, you have to maintain pulling stuff off, putting stuff on, those types of things.
But I would,
Yep.
you always like to have extra memory because you never know. Like tomorrow, if I videotape the presentations, the speeches, I'm going to use up a lot of space. Like I got to go back and make sure I've got enough
Maybe
space.
you have different cell phones?
Yep, everybody has different cell phones.
I
It's
got
up.
bundles of them, I guess.
Yep,
No, we work off of one cell phone.
They use one cell phone. but-
One cell phone, and we cannot lose it. We can't get it wet either. As we almost said the Army Navy day. So, but what I just encourage you is, it's so important to capture the stories of veterans, which we think is our number one mission. Is whenever we get a chance to talk to a veteran, we ask to do 3-question interview and just say, tell us about your experiences in the military. What did you learn? How did you make the transition from being in the military back to civilian life? We do that. Sometimes we'll run in, I do some business interviews, and sometimes I'll run into someone who says, oh, by the way, I was in the Army. As we did with a gentleman up in Connecticut last week. And I asked him, how did he make the transition? And this is after a business interview. And he actually got kind of emotional about it. He said, it was really something because he'd been in the Gulf War, and then he came back, and then, he went to school and so on.
Yeah.
And that's what we think is our number one mission, is to capture the story of veterans, whether they're a cadet, they're a young officer, an enlisted, a 25-year military veteran, or someone who served in the military 50 years ago. The other thing we say is our number one thing is if we can entertain a soldier or sailor or airman in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere overseas, is able to capture our tweets or our coverage of a game, and they get some enjoyment out of it, that makes our day. Because that's, we always say they're our number one viewer, is someone's on a deployment overseas. And, there was one time when a very particular West Point graduate was in Iraq, and Army would give up a touchdown. We got a comment back from him seconds later.
so Ken, thank you for coming down to Washington, D.C. from New York, sharing the things that you use to cover West Point sports, and sharing your ideas with us. We want to thank the audience for being here, and we're hoping to do more of this with other NALPA members and what they're doing, best practices, and go from there. So thanks for being here, Ken.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.